right, welcome everybody. My name is John Ferguson. I will be the facilitator of the first session here of this ETE conference. Let me begin with our first presenter this morning, Aashish Ghimire. Yep. Yes. He is a Ph.D. candidate in the College of Science in the Department of Computer Science here at Logan campus. And the title of his presentation will be Generative AI Tools in Education, a survey of educators' attitudes. So there will be a 5 to 10 minute Q&A session at the end, but other than that, I will turn it over to our presenter.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning. My name is Aashish. I swear I was not nervous until 2 minutes ago. What got me nervous is that he said it's going to be captioned for some reason. And with my accent, I'm nervous for the person who is going to caption the talk. So I'll try to go slow. Again, my name is Aashish. This is the work I'm doing with my advisor, Dr. Joanna Edwards, right there. But looks like I'm going to be doing all the talking today. So this is the work we have been doing for the last 6 months or so, trying to understand what do teachers and educators think about these new AI tool that have been popping up in like last year or so. We already went through that. Let's talk about what is generative AI or what is large language model. There is a difference, and for purpose of this study, this means ChatGPT. That's like what 90% of survey takers thought generative AI was, but also Google Bard, Codex, DALL-E if you're using image generator, or Stable Diffusion, or Adobe Firefly, any of these kind of tool. They are all in the same bucket. Just to distinguish, and this is really high level definition, and we're not going to talk about this after this slide. By generative AI, we mean any AI system that is capable of creating new data sample given the training data, right? So it basically have two kind of network in there. One discriminator and other creator, so they have a two competing network, try to create a realistic image or realistic anything, music. Large language model is a part of generative AI. It deals with mostly languages, but that also can cover coding and everything in between. But again, for purpose of this study, if I'm talking to a computer science professor, generative AI means a tool that can generate code. If I'm talking to an English professor, generative AI means ChatGPT that can write essay. And if I'm talking to an arts professor, it could mean a system that could make an image for you. So just to keep that in mind. Research questions. So in this particular project, I am looking to answer 3 broad questions in general. The first one is, how aware are we, or how aware are the educators about any of these tools? Do they even know about that? Have they heard about it? How did they hear? Things like that. The second one is, what do they think about the tool? So like, dislike, excited, thirds, planning on incorporating, planning on banning these tools, all of these things. And then finally, I was interested in looking on what drives that attitude and sentiment, meaning what makes you more positive or what makes you more repulsive towards any of these tools that we're going to discuss. So the method. And before anything, let me preface by saying this is self-reported survey, so this is always going to carry all these problems that comes with a survey-based research, right? So sometimes people want to show that they know more about something than they really do. Sometimes we have modest professors who say, I don't really know much, but then they go on to tell me everything about generative AI. So it has that implicit bias, but that's what we got. So we had a campus-wide survey to understand where we are at. Then we did quantitative analysis of this data. So we have there's that part, and then after that, when I was doing the first survey, I had a question saying, are you interested on follow-up interview? And I had really good response. So I did a bunch of interviews. Some went from 25 minutes and others were like an hour. We were just talking about AI and Doom at the end. And then I put this all interviews and the survey data together and did my analysis. So for the survey, it was 25 question survey. Most of those questions were Likert scale from 1 to 5, maybe saying I'm confident in level of 1 to 5 or something like that. And then there were some questions about demography, saying how long have you been teaching for, or which department do you teach for. And then the follow-up interview, it was loosely scripted, meaning I had maybe 5 to 10 questions that I was going to start interview with, but I allowed the interview to take the interview to any direction, so they were free to talk about any topic within that questions they wanted to. Survey responses, I got about 120 responses. I had to throw a couple out because they didn't complete the survey, but I had a 116 survey that I actually used in my data analysis. Over 40% of these respondents actually were eager to talk to someone. They just needed to talk to someone about these tools they keep hearing in news every day. 8 out of 9 USC schools were represented, so really good representation. And then 23 academic department plus library. So we had someone from library, and then we had someone from academic advising. So basically 25 departments responded. Okay, so this is the profile of my survey respondent. On the left, you have the bar chart of the various school, and because we are in USU, I took a liberty to put the acronym for our schools. So the SOB means School of Business, or QCNR is School of Natural Resources. We have pretty much, except the veterinary, which is a smaller school anyway, we had really good representation. If we talk about the department itself, computer science had to be the largest department, and it was. But then we had good representation from other departments throughout the school as well. Okay, how aware are educators of this generative AI-based tool across various campuses, right? So we started this survey in May. That was about 5 or 6 months after ChatGPT came in. So keep that in mind, because this has been changing so rapidly, and given the fact that ChatGPT was the fastest growing internet service when it came out, what it was on May might not be true right now. But 40% of the respondent, and those respondents are USC faculties, not students, use it regularly or at least periodically. That is one, that was a big number that surprised us first. And then I went on to ask, how did you learn about this tool? And that's the distribution of their answer. I was surprised, pleasantly surprised actually, that there were a number of faculties on campus who told me that there was someone in their department who is more technically inclined. If you are not in a technical department, or you're not in engineering or School of Science, and then those faculties kind of did an ad hoc conference or seminar to inform their colleague about these tools. So there were a lot of people from, a lot of respondents from that area as well. Then there were social media was the largest one. Let's move on to answering the second research question, is what are the educators' perception and sentiment about this tool? So to answer this particular question and to calculate sentiment, I used 2 particular responses from the survey. So there was a question that said AI tools like ChatGPT and Bard should be allowed to be integrated in education, and then the other one was should be banned. So just to keep it between 1 and 5, I use that equation so that it will keep all the sentiment value between 1 and 5. And okay, before that, let me talk about something else. So I asked a question about what was the first impression you had, like when you first saw this tool in action, what was your initial impression? So the most common word was amazed, Everybody was surprised, and then there were rarely any negative answers when I said what was your first impression. So let's preface this with they are starting with the impression that it is already positive, right? So they said it was really cool, it was really amazing, it was magical, things like that. And then I asked them, has that impression changed since you started using it? Did you find the limitation? Did you actually find new use cases? And then actually more than half of the respondents said they actually found it better the more they used it. So they found new use cases, they actually grew more positive of the tool. There were only 6% of respondents that said they grew more negative, and then rest were stayed the same. So this has been mostly positive among the educators. Sorry. I think I'm going to take 5 minutes.
Okay, we've had a short pause, some technical difficulties. Given the time we have left, in order to make some value of the downtime, I'll just ask a couple questions. How many of you are using AI in your classes? Oh, we're already starting. How many of you are using it, or have already prepared to use it this next semester? Interesting. You want to continue? Thank God.
Test. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm John Edwards. I'm Aashish's advisor. He's going to be just fine, just taking a little sit down. And I am not going to do nearly as good a job. So I apologize in advance. He was using we, but this has been all his work. Let's see here. Okay, so is that slideshow? We're good? Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about the survey that Aashish did starting in May. He sent out a request to about 900 and something educators here at Utah State and got about 120 responses, and over 40% of those respondents were willing to meet with him for a follow-up interview. 8 out of the 9 USU schools and colleges were represented in the responses, and 23 academic departments. So on the left, and I apologize for the acronyms, but the school or college is this shows how many respondents were from each college. Changed the labels in the latest version, so I'm trying to remember here. So we got the most respondents on the far right, the School of Business, College of Science, third from the right, and then Education, third from the left, and then what's CAS? Agriculture, right, on the left. Those had the most responses. Art had very few. And then department, the most responses were from computer science, and that was partly because computer scientists are more interested in things like this, at least the technical aspects of it. And so he got more, but he also did a second round of requests among the CS department because one of his research questions was how computer science educators differ from other educators in other fields. And so he needed a higher response rate from computer science. Nevertheless, we got quite a few from the sciences and engineering various departments there. Okay, so familiarity level. Most educators have heard, so this is the left chart. Most have heard of it. Most have used it once or twice. Very few have never heard from it. The center chart. The amazing thing in the center chart is that over half of educators have used it in their courses, and which was quite a surprise to both Aashish and me. And then On the far right, encountered in students' work. So this is perceived, whether they've encountered it. So at the far right, they've definitely encountered it. That's still a perception of whether they've definitely encountered it. But a lot of most responses like, I'm not really sure, because a lot of us aren't exactly sure how to detect whether it's been used or not. So how aware are educators of generative AI-based tools across various groups and departments? And that is 40%. Well, that's the research question, but then we have 40% of all faculty members at Utah State use it regularly or periodically. And we can all be very grateful that Aashish is back, looking chipper and dapper.
Yeah, thank you. That was the first panic attack of life. Live. I've never had that before, and now I know. Also, 99% sure that was a panic attack, but I'm not even sure. I've never had it before, so I think I need to talk to someone if that's a real thing. If someone have had it before, please let me know. Okay, let's go here. Okay, so those are the graphs I was looking for, and that drove me insane for a second. So let's talk about the familiarity. And we are looking these by department to see if there was any differences. And we can see that College of Science and School of Business had the highest level of familiarity with this tool. And then I was also looking the familiarity by age group. And we can see there's not a lot of difference, but as we go older in the age group of faculties, there's a higher variance, and the mean familiarity drops slightly. We basically talked about this before. There's not much of difference in a tenure group. So if you're thinking that, hey, if someone have been teaching for a long time and they are not receptive of this new technology, that's false. Like that does not happen. And we don't need to meet. This is our meeting time. Let's go. Okay, so for the sentiment, I also did the same thing. I looked into sentiment by school and age group, and similar trend continues here. The sentiment goes down slightly by age group. And then if we look for School of Business and School of Science, they have the highest sentiment or highest positive sentiment towards these tools. And then College of Arts, not surprisingly, has the lowest mean sentiment on this tool. This is the change in sentiment. We already talked about this. So the most important question that I was trying to answer is what determines, and then this is the basically summary. So if a faculty thinks the benefit outweigh the risks of using such tool, that makes them positive. So this is the biggest driver of their sentiment. Also, if they feel like it enhances the education, if they see the value in it, and then finally, if they are confident that it can be integrated into their classroom. If they are more like, hey, I'm not sure how to use this, then that might make them more negative towards the tool. And then the factor affecting the sentiment negatively are number one, more than cheating and dishonesty, is that if they feel like it is going to decrease their critical thinking, then they are more negative towards the tool. And then other one is if they think it increases cheating or dishonesty, then that makes them more negative. Did more analysis to see if we can use this factor to predict the sentiment based on these variables, and with pretty good accuracy we can. And then another important thing that I actually thought I was going to see difference, but that proved me wrong. And in a way, we got, I guess, we got confirmation that it does not affect sentiment, is that the type of assignments you use in class, and then the type of your class teaching style, right? If you use a lecture versus group discussion versus experiments, those does not affect your sentiment. So I did not see any variation based on those, and I did not see any variation based on the type of question you ask in classes. Like if you give essay, or if you give multiple choice, or if you do the testing center quizzes, and if you do Canvas quizzes, it does not really affect your sentiment on this tool. Okay, we'll actually come back to this during discussion. We have a little bit of time actually. But the most common themes I saw is that I guess the biggest thing was that the cat is out of the bag. We need to deal with it. We need to talk about it at least. The other variations were that I just cannot tell if the answer was written by a student or if this was AI generated. I have no confidence in myself. And then other variation of I don't know how to test. I don't know what to test anymore. Or do we draw a line between plagiarism and using a tool to assist yourself? So these are common quotes and theme. And then we also, during the interviews, talked about what are the biggest opportunities faculty see with these tools, and what are the biggest concern they have, right? So here I have the top 4 opportunities ranked. So most of the places where the faculties like this tool, they saw them as an idea generator or the starting point. So if you're trying to do anything, and most of the time starting is the biggest challenge, right? The student just don't know where to begin from. Using these tools as a springboard or framework generator is the biggest positive they see about this tool. And then having information in the fingertip, being able to know about almost any topic rather than clicking 10 links in Google is seen as a positive. Automating the mundane task they see every day, and then followed by having a personal TA 24/7. Let's talk about the concern that was expressed, the potential of cheating and potential to stifle creativity were the most common. And then another really common theme was that I'm concerned that a student is not going to understand the process. They are just going to think about product. That was the big thing. Risks on fabricated and incorrect result. I'm actually surprised we didn't see this more frequently. One of the reasons might be that faculties might even not be aware that, hey, everything this AI generates are not true. So, it was only mentioned 1 in 4 times, so they were not really really worried about that, and that kind of seems like a problem to me. And then equity and access, and then lack of diversity of idea. And then the last one, even though it was mentioned 5% of the time, I want to highlight that because there was a concern saying that, hey, if we're using this tool and these tools are created with finite amount of training data, so it has the idea that we already created, it has the knowledge that we already created, and if we rely on those tools to do our research, then we might not expand the boundary of our knowledge. So that was really interesting. Actually, it was raised up by only 5% of the interview. That is actually 2 people. Let's see. Things, and then when I say discussion, these are open-ended questions that often came up with interviews. And when I asked them questions, they were just like, hey, I don't know answers, but I have some questions, and I think we need to talk about it. And those were adaptation. How do we adapt with these tools? A lot of time faculties were like, I know I need to do something, but I don't know what. And then there was a discussion about, hey, we need something in campus, maybe a resource where we can go talk to, maybe get up-to-date information about this tool, maybe get trainings on how do we use these tools in education. And then we need to work on minimizing the risk while we maximize the advantage. So that was, more of a thought always occurring in these interviews. And then finally, unresolved question like what is the test and assessment, new policy. And then, okay, so one point in discussion that that came up with interview, and I want to actually highlight this one because I think it's pretty important, is that a lot of time faculties were thinking, hey, I wish there was a tool where you can put the answer and it will tell me if a student wrote it or if the ChatGPT or some tools generated it. So they oftentimes mentioned using Turnitin, Canvas, Blackboard, and then a couple actually suggested using ChatGPT itself to ask if it wrote the answer. Please do not do that. That does not, it's not correct. It will just give you random answers. OpenAI itself actually had a tool to detect if answer was written by ChatGPT. It actually shut down last week because it was not correct enough. It had a high false positive rate, and because there's such a huge risk for any false positive, you are essentially giving someone 0 or expelling them out of program. This is something that needs to be taken really seriously. One thing that came up with the discussion pretty often in the interview is that using this tool to screen and just to narrow down the number of assignment that you want to read closely and pay more attention, that is okay. Like you could actually run all of these assignments through tools, and then if you use your judgment to figure out if the student did not write answer, that's fine. But these tools itself, they are not good enough to tell you anything. And then just I guess like example on that one, the tool called ZeroGPT. Actually, I saw that tool in the recommended tool section from our, I think, provost office. There is some resource about ChatGPT. There's a tool for GPT-0 or ZeroGPT. I'm like, okay, let me see how these tools work. So I opened the tool. I used one of the IRB template that was generated in 2019, so it was definitely not done by ChatGPT. I copied and pasted that thing in the tool, and it told me it was 99% AI generated. So, just to give you an example that it does not work. I also asked about policy or lack thereof about this tool. Actually, we are going to do a different project on just policy. So that is not the focus of this paper, but just to give you a highlight on what faculty thought about the policy. They thought 60% of the faculty basically said we need a complete autonomy. We don't need any guidance or direction from the school on how to decide on this tool. So, and then 30% or so had, hey, we need to have some guidance from department, but then we should be able to make our own call. And then 10% said, hey, I don't want to be the one punishing student, or I don't want to be the only one punishing student. So there need to be a uniform policy among in the school so that everybody follows the same principle. Quickly talking about setting expectation. I asked if they have talked about these tools in classroom, or if they plan to talk about this tool in classroom. Roughly 12% said they already are requiring to use AI in their assignment. So for an example, there was someone I interviewed from School of Arts. They said they require a student to use one of these generative AI tool to come up with the first iteration of a project, and then they were required to show how they improved and things like that. So it was a part of their assignment. 44% were planning on addressing, or at least setting an expectation in classroom about this tool. 28% were, I'm not sure how to talk about it. I don't know if I want to open this can of worms. And then 16% said, I have no intention of even talking about this in classroom. As I alluded, the extension of this work is that we're going to look onto policy, or if we have policy, what kind of policy we need, or if we can even make a framework to come up with such policy. I'm working on that research. Actually, this is going to be not just USU, but looking into schools and even K through 12 school in 4 different states. So if you are a policymaker, if you have a department here, or if you have thoughts or concern about what policy we need to have or what policy we need to have in place, please email us. And that is all I had. And I still have 4 more minutes for questions and discussion. And then I will bring this one back so that might give you a point for discussion. Yep.
What do you think that like a solution or the solution or steps that educators need to take is that they're learning these tools?
So talking with like 30 faculty or 35 faculties over last 3 months, I think one thing we desperately need to figure out or define is that we have a course syllabus. We always define, hey, this is what we are going to teach in this class. This is the objective of this class, right? So we kind of need to think about this tool together with the objective of class. So if, let's say, if a class is about teaching you grammar, right, then the total ban makes sense, because if you are always writing a random sentence with no verb and putting it in ChatGPT and writing the full sentence, then you are not learning grammar, right? But then if your class is about a high level thinking of idea, then this tool actually can be a great equalizer. For example, there are people with English being their second or third language, and then if you're taking class about, I don't know, computer programming, and you're writing a report, why should your English not being operated with somebody else's English hold you behind on doing only in that class, right? So this could be a really good tool if the class is not trying to teach you that, or even if you're doing like a higher level computer science class, and you just need to write a small code snippet, and the class is not about writing that code. Class is about analyzing data or something else, and then if you need to do that quickly rather than using Stack Overflow for 2 hours, if you can quickly write code, I think that's fine. But I think the starting point should be what we are trying to do it in class, what we are trying to teach in class, and then how does that align with the policy. Yeah.
Do you have any examples? So you mentioned that like 40% and now probably more of faculty are using ChatGPT at least a little bit. Do you have any examples of creative ways that they're using it?
I do. So they said every time they had multiple choice question, they really struggle on coming up creative other wrong option that they are really good, but they don't want to sit there and come with like 5 wrong answers for every right answer, right? So they would be like, hey, this is the question, I have the answer, make this a multiple choice question generating like 4 wrong answers. So that was really good, I think. And then there were others saying, sometime if I am like looking for a flaw in argument, because like if I'm reading 40 essay in a row, then I might even forget what was in the beginning of this essay by the time I get to the end. And if I'm looking how coherent the essay is, I might not be the best in attention during that time. So they said like they will just copy the essay in ChatGPT or something like that and say like, hey, what are the logical fallacies in this argument? What are the problems? And then it would just give you the answers in its perspective, right? So they were actually using it for grading. So yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you show some ML algorithm, right?
Uh-huh.
So how does predictive model algorithm help you to make help the policymaker make the rule?
So that was more of a saying like, what is the biggest concern, what we need to address, right? So I had other things like training resource. If the educator think they are confident enough to understand this tool, or if they feel like they can keep up with the tools. So let's say the correlation shows that there is a high correlation between their own confidence on using AI with their sentiment, right? So that means that we might need to work on training this faculty. We might need to work on having those resources on campus, or basically trying to see like what drives the sentiment, and then if we know what drives the sentiment, then we can work on addressing these individual issues. Because one way or other, this needs to be addressed, because this is not going back. Like it is going to be used. And then I think the biggest one thing that scared me the most, and I don't think I have that data here. But I asked a question saying like, hey, how confident are you distinguishing the AI written tool or AI written answers from a student written answer? And then there is a large number of educators high in confidence thinking that they can distinguish, and then the other answer for their other survey answers would be, no, I have not seen my student use AI tool in their classroom. So there might be a news for them that there is probably someone using that tool and they just don't know. So.
Do you have that chart on the difference between CS educators and others in their confidence
I do not, but I can just because like I didn't want to make CS versus non-CS in here and divide make a division. There's a CS rule right here, but I asked during the qualitative interview, we kind of categorized their answer about, hey, what do you know about these tools, into technical answer, some basic understanding, and then false understanding. Naturally, the CS professors or CS educators have the highest level of technical understanding. And then there's another question asking, hey, how confident are you about answering, are you distinguishing between student written versus machine generated answer? And CS professor actually had the lower confidence on distinguishing answer. So basically that tells you that if you don't use tool a lot, then you probably are more confident ignorance is a bliss.
Thank you very
Awesome,
much.
thank you very much.